We have two fun terms to deal with in this lecture that we have to breach sooner or later because we're talking about communication and they are inherent to all human communication. So we need to define our bounds as well. But this strategy is going to be to find and or avoid unfair assumptions and incompatible presuppositions. That's quite a zinger. I made it wordy on purpose because, again, this will be a good exercise and we have to talk about it. What are assumptions and what are presuppositions? Well, let's start by defining them. And they are really tricky to define. It took a lot of time to try and figure out how do I explain this without using the word assume. Boy, that was hard. You probably know what an assumption is. You probably know what assume is. Presupposition is a little bit trickier. We use these all the time. In fact, every single sentence I use in every single one of these videos, I'm making scores and scores of presuppositions. So are you. And I'm making a lot of assumptions as well. A presupposition is something that must be true, that I conclude or you conclude must be true. Otherwise, what I said makes no sense. Okay? What's it for instance? If I told you that I spent the day working, you can make the presupposition, rightly so, that I have a job. It doesn't really make sense for me to work an entire day or to spend the day working, rather, if I don't also have a job, right? A ridiculous one, you can make the presupposition that if I say I spent the day working, that I wasn't attacked by zombies. Okay, ridiculous. But if I was attacked by zombies, I probably would be searching for a place to hide, or I would be fighting them off. I would be trying to alert the authorities, right? I'd be doing other things besides working because there'd be a lot of things more important. Okay? That's at least how I'm going to define a presupposition is you have to assume or you conclude that this thing is true without saying it or without talking about it. Otherwise, what I said makes no sense. An assumption, on the other hand, is something that you can conclude or you come to this conclusion without talking about it, but everything else could still make sense without it. As a for instance there, if I said I spent the day working, you maybe assume, oh, Rob spent the day working because he needs money. Or Rob spent the day working because he cares about his students and loves to teach. Or Rob spent the day working because he was bored and he didn't have anything else to do, right? All of those might be true, but they're not necessarily true. And if you assume them, then that happens, without our discussion or without our interaction. The reason these are so tricky is for two reasons. One, they involve propositions and logic and arguments, which hopefully you as a technical person can appreciate and maybe are more tilted toward than the general public. The other reason they're hard, though, is because, as I mentioned at the beginning, they are inherent to all human communication. And I am not qualified, at least I'm no more qualified than you are, to talk about how to handle these things. Okay? As another for instance. I live on a property with my brother-in-law and my sister, and we had a pump break on the property. And I assumed that he was going to fix it. Well, he assumed that I was going to fix it, so it didn't get fixed for a couple days and caused some really big problems. That is the type of just general human miscommunication that happens as a result of an assumption that we are not interested in here. We're talking specifically about technical communication. So an assumption with regard to technical communication, what's a really easy example? We've already talked about it. Jargon. If you use jargon, you assume that the person knows what the jargon means, that terminology, that acronym, that complicated phrase, okay? Whatever it is, that's an assumption. And if it's unfair, we want to find those beforehand or before we send the email, do the presentation, or if we're talking, we want to avoid using those. Another example, this happens oftentimes with your peers if you assume they have knowledge and they really don't, okay? We want to root those out. Presuppositions, on the other hand, that are incompatible is how I phrased it. If you go into, let's say you're going to do a presentation for a bunch of stakeholders or investors, and we have this problem, and we're going to solve it by using React.js. This is a JavaScript, a web framework. We're going to use React, and you keep going. But somebody in the audience is an Angular developer or has worked with a whole bunch of Angular developers, and they're coming to this presentation knowing that you're going to talk about UI frameworks. And when you immediately pass over React, you come with different presuppositions about what the best solution is or why that's the best solution. And you just immediately pass over it. In a way, that is an assumption, yes, that you assume that this one is better. But if you just immediately say this, the correct solution implement is this, you've made the presupposition that everybody in the audience understands what React is and that it is better than all of these other ones. Okay? If you come with different presuppositions, you need to move back. You need to move lower, maybe down in the process, and explain the reason that I chose this is for this is for these reasons, so that you can get on the same page. Now, they may not agree with you, but when you're dealing with technical knowledge that is deeply layered, and you have lots of technologies sitting on top of each other, or you have them like maybe in dominoes so that one assumes knowledge of the other, or like an onion where there's a whole bunch of layers, it's very, very easy to come with your own set of presuppositions, your own set of assumptions about what is best and why, and someone else comes with a completely different set, especially if they're technical, but definitely if they're non-technical as well, because they may have heard things that will contradict what you are saying, and you don't even start in the right place. Okay? So there's a lot there. What I want you to do in this case is actually go back and look through your email inbox. I want you to find emails that you have sent. Recently it would be ideal, but any email that qualifies is worth spending time on. I want you to find at least 3. And I want you to look for assumptions that you made, and I want you to correct them. Okay? It could be, I assumed the person knew what this meant, and it would have been better, right? It was unfair. It would have been better for me to explain this concept, or it would have been better for me to ask them, do you know what this means? I sent the schematic, and I assumed they would be able to read it, and I should have said, does this make sense, or something like that, right? I should have said, I drew this schematic and I changed this part. Do you understand why? Or do you understand the consequences of the decision that I made? The presupposition thing will be a little bit trickier because it's a more abstract concept, or at least you're less used to using it, at least less used to talking about it. You use them all the time. What are some presuppositions that you approach in some of your recent communication? And if you can find an email, whatever place is useful to go to, but where did you come to an interaction with somebody or somebody's, right, an audience of some type, and you assumed a whole bunch of stuff, and you went down a line of reasoning technically that was incompatible with something that they had, and so you immediately lost each other. Okay? You want to find places where you could have connected better by making different presuppositions, or, as I said, going back in time to, okay, we can't start here because we don't agree. I'm here and they're here. Okay, we can't start here because we're too far apart, but we can start here. So I'll start here and help them understand this is my train of reasoning. Now, again, they may not agree with it, but at least you'll overcome those technical barriers that come with, almost all technology, almost all engineering, almost all technical work is very layered, and it's easy to come with assumptions that your work doesn't make sense without.